Have you ever felt that your relationship with money carries a weight far heavier than numbers on a bank statement? There are days when the wallet feels like a mirror, reflecting not only your balance but your worth. It's in those moments of silence, when you look at your expenses, your earnings, your debts, that something deeper begins to speak. A trembling voice beneath the surface, a whisper from childhood, a memory of shame or pride or fear. Money, for many, is not just a means of exchange. It becomes a stage where the unconscious performs its most secret play. The shadow dances here, and it wears masks of guilt, greed, unworthiness, and control. Perhaps without realizing it, you've inherited a story. Money is bad. People like us never have enough. I have to sacrifice myself to be secure. These aren't just thoughts, they are psychic contracts signed long ago with the ink of survival. And yet, somewhere within, a different voice emerges. One that doesn't scream for more but yearns for alignment. Not the abundance of possessions, but the abundance of peace, of authenticity, of not having to split yourself between your values and your needs. You walk into a job that pays the bills but steals your soul. You say yes to work that buys your time but sells your essence, and a quiet grief grows inside, a sense that you've betrayed something sacred, yourself. What if money is not the enemy but a compass? A sacred tool that reveals where you are not yet whole, a path that shows where you still seek external validation because you haven't yet embraced your inner worth. Could it be that money doesn't corrupt but reveals? That it's not about how much you have but about what you believe you deserve? When you look at your financial life, you may see numbers, but beneath them lies a mythology. Your myths around scarcity, your ancestral wounds, your unspoken fears. And if you listen closely, money is speaking your unconscious language. There is a moment, maybe it's now, where you realize that your discomfort with abundance isn't about greed. It's about a fracture between your internal values and the external world, a split between the person you were told to be and the soul you truly are. And in that space of dissonance, we find the invitation to align, to bring consciousness to what was once automatic, to look at money not with fear, not with craving, but with curiosity. Where did this belief come from? Who gave it to me? Does it still serve the person I am becoming? The truth is, many of us were raised to chase security like it was love, to confuse worth with productivity, to measure value in hours and titles and paychecks. But your worth is not an invoice. It's not negotiable. It doesn't fluctuate with your income. You are valuable even in your stillness, even in your confusion, even in your silence. And maybe the journey is not to fight for more, but to heal the part of you that thought you had to earn love through performance. Because when that heals, money becomes different. Not a monster to fear or a god to worship, but a current to navigate, consciously. You begin to ask new questions. Not how do I get more, Sant, but what do I truly need? Not what will they pay me, but what is the value of living in integrity with myself? Not how do I become successful, but how do I become whole? There is no formula here, no shortcut, only a path of deep inner excavation. You must unearth your beliefs, grieve what was inherited but never questioned, and slowly, like sunlight through old curtains, something shifts. You no longer hustle for worth. You no longer betray your soul for approval. You begin to act from a place of inner sufficiency. And in that sacred alignment, something paradoxical happens. Money begins to flow, not always in floods, but in rhythm, in resonance. Because when your values and your actions sing the same song, the universe listens. Abundance, then, is not a goal, it's a side effect of inner truth. And maybe, just maybe, what you were seeking in wealth was never money, but peace, freedom, belonging to yourself. And now you stand at the edge of a quiet revolution, not to conquer wealth, but to reclaim the soul that was once sold for it. There's a tension you can't quite name, something that tightens in your chest when you think about making choices that feel true to your soul, but might threaten your financial stability. It's a quiet war, fought in boardrooms and bedrooms, in job interviews and sleepless nights, the conflict between what brings you security and what brings you meaning. You were taught to survive first, to choose the path that makes sense even if it doesn't make peace. Maybe you took the job that was expected of you. You stayed because it was safe. You said yes when your body screamed no. And over time, the life you built began to feel like a house without windows. It stands, it protects, but it does not breathe. Values are not just ideals, they are blood. They are the invisible threads that hold your spirit together. But when those threads are severed by choices made from fear, something in you begins to collapse, slowly, quietly. A kind of soul hunger that no paycheck can satisfy. You might have been praised for being responsible, respected for being successful. But when you looked in the mirror, did you see yourself, or the version of you that fit the mold? Carl Jung warned us of the persona, the mask we wear to survive the world. And often, that mask becomes most rigid around money. We become who we need to be to keep the checks coming, to keep the image intact. But beneath the mask, something aches, something real, something true. There comes a moment in every life when you must decide, will you betray yourself to belong, or will you risk discomfort to be whole? This is not a call to recklessness, it's a call to presence, to awareness, to the sacred work of asking, is this choice aligned with who I truly am? And if the answer is no, then what is the cost? Not just financially, but spiritually. So many live with the quiet grief of dreams buried under practicality. But the soul is not pragmatic, it is poetic, and it does not negotiate with fear. It waits, patiently, until you remember what you used to love before the world told you what you should want. We've mistaken sacrifice for virtue, as if suffering ensures goodness, as if denying your truth makes you noble. But what if true service, true contribution, comes from honoring your deepest values, not silencing them? When your work reflects your essence, it doesn't just feed your bank account, it feeds your life. That doesn't mean it's easy, it means it's real. There is pain in choosing the path of integrity, but there is also clarity, and over time, clarity becomes currency. The kind that attracts what resonates with your truth, not what conforms to your mask. Your values are a compass, but they cannot guide you if you've buried them under shoulds. You must dig, unearth them, ask, what truly matters to me? What do I stand for when no one is watching? What am I willing to risk to feel alive again? Some will say, you're idealistic, that following your heart is naive. But what is truly naive? Trusting your soul, or trusting a system that keeps you fragmented. The market does not determine your value. It reflects what you've been willing to tolerate. And when you shift, when you realign, something begins to change. Not immediately, not without fear, but inevitably. You stop selling yourself by the hour. You stop abandoning your intuition. You begin to weave your essence into everything you do. And with that comes a new kind of wealth. One that isn't loud, but steady. Not boastful, but grounded. A wealth of alignment, of coherence, of being one person, not two. This is not the path for everyone. It is the path for those who are done pretending, and perhaps that includes you. There's a quiet, invisible wound that many carry when it comes to money. It doesn't scream, it doesn't bleed, but it whispers in moments of hesitation, in the tightening of the chest when someone offers to pay you, in the subtle discomfort of asking for what you're worth. It's the wound of not feeling deserving. You don't remember exactly when it began. Maybe it was in childhood, when you heard your parents argue about money, when you were told we can't afford that with a tone that made you feel guilty just for wanting. Maybe you watched someone you love work endlessly and still struggle, and you learned that suffering was the price of survival. Maybe no one ever told you that you were allowed to receive without shame. So now, as an adult, the shadow shows up. Not in overt ways, but in the ways you sabotage opportunities. In the way you undercharge, overgive, or apologize for taking up space. The shadow of unworthiness doesn't shout, it withdraws. It convinces you to settle, to shrink, to doubt. At the root of scarcity is not a lack of money, but a lack of self-trust, a fractured relationship with the self that says, I must prove my worth through sacrifice. That whisper becomes a mantra. I'm not enough to ask for more. And so you don't. You tolerate. You endure. You become the martyr of your own life. But your soul knows. It knows that abundance is not just about income, it's about permission. Permission to receive, to expand, to be seen in your fullness, not just your usefulness. Carl Jung wrote about the shadow, the parts of us we repress, reject, or disown. Often the part that believes I deserve to be supported, to be compensated, to live in ease, is buried deep beneath layers of guilt and fear. It feels dangerous to believe in your own worth when the world taught you that only the loud, the ruthless, or the lucky get to have abundance. But what if that story isn't yours to carry anymore? There's a moment in the healing process when you stop asking, "What do I need to fix?" and start asking, "What part of me did I abandon in order to feel safe?" And often, it's the part that believed in ease, in joy, in the possibility that you didn't have to earn love or money through exhaustion. Reclaiming that part isn't arrogance, it's integrity, because the soul doesn't thrive in scarcity. It contracts, it hides, it forgets its own light. There's nothing spiritual about struggle for struggle's sake. There's no virtue in self-denial that leads to bitterness. You were not born to constantly prove your worth through labor. You were born to embody it, and that embodiment begins with telling the truth. I am worthy of abundance not because I do, but because I am. It's not about entitlement, it's about alignment. When you stop betraying yourself to be accepted, you begin to attract opportunities that don't require you to fracture. You begin to work from a place of wholeness, and in that place, the shame around receiving dissolves. You no longer equate humility with invisibility. You no longer confuse generosity with self-erasure. You give and you receive from the same open heart. This is the inner shift that changes everything, not overnight. Not without resistance, but deeply, permanently. Because when you rewire your relationship with worth, you rewrite your financial reality. Money begins to reflect not just what you do, but who you believe you are. And so the question is no longer, how do I make more? But, am I willing to stop rejecting the part of me that feels worthy of more? The answers don't come from the mind. They come from the body, the breath, the space where your inner child still waits to hear, you don't have to earn your place, you already belong. Let that be the beginning. Somewhere between the need to survive and the longing to feel whole, money becomes more than currency. It becomes a language of power, a language of pain, a language of the soul trying to speak through numbers, transactions, hesitations. Carl Jung spoke of energy, not only in the form of psyche, but in the way life itself moves. He saw the psyche as a living system, alive, pulsing, seeking balance through symbols, dreams, instincts. What if money too is a form of psychic energy, a symbol not just of material exchange, but of alignment, or the lack of it? When you live disconnected from your inner truth, money becomes erratic. It arrives with guilt or not at all. It disappears as quickly as it comes. It attaches itself to fear, control, or self-betrayal. You might find yourself chasing it, resenting it, or pretending you don't care. But all of those are symptoms of the same dis-ease, disconnection from yourself. True abundance doesn't start in the wallet. It starts in the soul. You begin to feel it, not when you hit a number, but when your external life mirrors your internal clarity. When the work you do speaks the same language as the truth you carry. When you stop compromising your values for validation. There is a profound difference between force and flow. One drains you, the other carries you. Force says, I must do more to be enough. Flow whispers, when I am enough, what I do is powerful. You've been taught to hustle, to strive, to fight. But what happens when you stop pushing and start listening? What emerges when you pause and ask, what wants to come through me, instead of, what do I need to make happen? Money then becomes an echo, a reflection of your resonance. It arrives not because you demand it, but because your being becomes a space of coherence, a tuning fork vibrating at the frequency of truth. And that truth isn't always loud. Sometimes it looks like saying no to a job that drains you, saying yes to rest, setting boundaries where you once gave without limit, letting go of roles that earned you approval but cost you your peace. That is the sacred act of alignment. It requires courage, because it will challenge everything you've been taught. That suffering is noble, that overgiving is loving, that silence is safe. But alignment is not about ease. It's about integrity. And in integrity, you reclaim your energy. You stop leaking life force into situations that do not nourish you. You stop negotiating your worth in rooms that never saw you. As you align, you begin to notice something subtle but powerful: synchronicity. The calls that come at the right moment, the opportunities that feel like mirrors, the clients, the jobs, the ideas that reflect your evolution. Jung called this the meaningful coincidence. The outer world begins to respond to your inner coherence. This is not magic, it's maturity. It's what happens when the unconscious no longer runs the show in silence, when the parts of you that once acted out in fear are brought into the light of awareness. You begin to move from reaction to creation, from scarcity to sufficiency, from proving to expressing, and that expression becomes your offering to the world, not as a brand, not as a product, but as a presence, the essence of who you are, unfiltered, and that, more than any strategy, becomes magnetic. You don't need to chase abundance, you need to become a vessel that can hold it. That vessel is not built through performance, but through presence. Through the daily devoted practice of staying true to what you know, even when it's uncomfortable, through shedding the layers that were never really yours. Money flows where energy is clear, and clarity begins when you stop asking what the world wants from you and start asking what your soul wants to give. Let yourself be guided by that, not the noise, not the pressure, but the quiet certainty that alignment isn't just spiritual. It's practical. It works, not always quickly, but deeply, sustainably, in ways that restore you rather than deplete you. Because when your life is in tune with your truth, the world begins to pay attention. There is a moment in every inner journey when you realize the wealth you were chasing outside was a reflection of something you'd lost within. You looked for numbers to comfort your fear, for status to silence your doubt, for security to fill the hollow space carved by years of self-abandonment. And yet, none of it lasted. None of it touched the part of you that needed to feel seen. True abundance does not arrive with applause. It arrives in stillness, in the quiet, knowing that you are no longer fractured, that you no longer have to perform, to hustle, to earn your own existence. You stop trying to impress. You start trying to feel, and in that shift, a deeper richness emerges. It's not about giving everything away, nor is it about accumulating endlessly. It's about entering into a sacred reciprocity with life. You begin to notice the small graces, the unexpected kindness, the beauty in simplicity, the peace in alignment. These are not luxuries. They are signs that you are no longer at war with yourself. The journey toward financial freedom becomes inseparable from the journey toward inner freedom. You begin to understand wealth is not something you possess, it's something you become. And it begins with honesty, with telling the truth about what matters to you, even if it costs you comfort. Even if it means letting go of identities that once protected you. You stop seeing money as a measure of your value and start seeing it as a reflection of your relationship with value itself. How you value your time, your energy, your intuition, your boundaries, your joy. This is where the deepest shift occurs. You no longer crave abundance as escape. You invite it as resonance. There is no longer a gap between who you are and how you live. No longer a split between your soul and your survival. You begin to embody your truth, and that embodiment becomes your magnet. And the beauty of this abundance is that it cannot be taken. It doesn't vanish with market changes. It doesn't depend on likes, followers, or approval. It's rooted in the part of you that is eternal, unchanging, whole. Carl Jung reminded us, the privilege of a lifetime is to become who you truly are. In that becoming, you gain a wealth that no institution can offer, the wealth of integrity, of clarity, of inner quiet. You stop chasing, you start choosing, and what you choose reflects the life you are now worthy of living. It is no longer about having more, it's about being more. Being honest in your work, being present in your relationships, being spacious in your choices. Abundance is not excess, it's enoughness. Enoughness to rest without guilt, to speak without fear, to walk away without apology, to stand in your worth without armor. And in that state you become generous, not because you are trying to be good, but because you are full. Your cup overflows not from obligation, but from essence. You give from the center, not from depletion. This is the return to yourself. To the place within that was never broken, only buried. To the rhythm of your own life, no longer dictated by fear, but guided by truth. And here, in this quiet place of inner abundance, you understand. You were never meant to compete. You were meant to contribute, to bring forth the unique expression that only you carry, to live a life that is not louder, but deeper, a life that doesn't just look good, but feels like home. Have you ever asked yourself, not in fear, but in stillness, what kind of life would truly feel like enough? Not enough to impress, not enough to survive, but enough to breathe deeply, to feel safe in your own skin, to live in harmony with your soul. What if money was never the real goal, but merely a mirror, reflecting the places within you that still seek healing, still long for truth, still ache to be seen without condition? And what if the abundance you've been searching for was simply your own presence fully returned? You are not broken, you are not behind, you are simply being called gently, fiercely back to alignment, to listen to your values, to reclaim your worth, to allow the sacred current of life to flow through you, unblocked, unapologetic, whole. Because abundance is not a destination. It is the natural rhythm of a soul no longer in hiding. So ask yourself now, what belief about money are you finally ready to release? What part of you is ready to stop earning love and start embodying it? This is your invitation to rest, to realign, to remember who you are, and to let your life reflect that remembrance. If this journey touched something deep within you, I invite you to support this channel with a super thanks. Your contribution helps bring more content like this into the world. Quiet, real, healing. Subscribe to the channel. Comment below where you're watching from, and share what part of this video resonated most with your soul. And if you feel called, watch the next video in this series. It might hold the next key your heart is looking for. This isn't just content. It's a path home. And you are not walking it alone.